Hello and welcome to another video by Perfect Scores. This is Preetinder Kaur and currently we are doing biology. We have just done a video on the chemical properties of water and other important chemical elements. So in this video we are going to focus on three categories of important compounds in our body, which is carbohydrates, lipids and proteins. So let's get started with carbohydrates. But before that, you need to know that carbohydrates, lipids and proteins, they are known as organic compounds. Now, how actually are these two kinds of compounds differentiated from each other? I'll give you a little information on that. Now, organic compounds are all the compounds that contain carbon and all those compounds that are found in living things. So the exceptions for that would be hydrogen carbonates, carbonates, and oxides of carbon. Apart from these, any compound that contains carbon and that is found in living things will be known as anorganic compounds. Inorganic compounds consists of all the other compounds that are there. So coming back to the topic of discussion, that is carbohydrates. Now, these are organic compounds. They have a constitution of one or more simple sugars that follow the basic general formula of CH2OX. So that would be the monomer form of any of these simple sugars, and anything that comes under this category, any organic compound that has one or more simple sugars that follow the general basic formula in the form of monomers are known as carbohydrates. There is one exception to this basic formula. That means sometimes in this formula you can have addition of nitrogen as well. So let me give you an example of two very commonly used sugars, that is glucose and ribose. So glucose is C6H12O6 and ribose is C5H10O5. So this is how a glucose molecule looks like, and this is what a ribose molecule looks like. So there are 5 carbon atoms, that's why it's in the shape of a pentagon, and here we had 6 carbon atoms, and that is why it was in the shape of a hexagon with one extra, the 6th carbon atom being used over here in this bond. So let's go through some examples of carbohydrates. Now, carbohydrates can be of 3 types. One is monosaccharides, for example glucose, galactose and fructose. They can also be disaccharides, that means 2 units. For example, lactose, maltose and sucrose. And then there can be polysaccharides with more than 2 units. For example, cellulose. So these are all a little complex molecules. Glycogen and starch. It's very important to know the functions that these few sugar molecules they play in our body. So let's get started with the importance of these sugars in case of animals. So I'm going to take up 3 sugars, that is glucose, lactose and glycogen. When it comes to plants, the 3 sugars that I'm going to use are going to be fructose, sucrose and cellulose. So the main use of glucose is it's used as a source of energy. and it can be broken down to form ATP by the process of cellular respiration. Coming to lactose, lactose is a sugar that is found in the milk of mammals, and it helps in maintaining the health of bones and teeth. Coming to glycogen, that is used by animals for short-term energy storage. That is, it fulfills the needs of energy between meals. And the storage is done in the liver. Coming to plants, fructose, it's found in honey and in onions. It is very sweet and it's a very good source of energy. The second one is sucrose. It is used primarily as a transportable energy form because it does not get metabolized when it is being transported. So it's a very good way of transporting food in plants. And two examples would be sugar beet and sugar cane. And coming to the third one, cellulose. As the name suggests, it's a very important component of the cell wall. So it is used in plants, but since the cell wall is not there in animals, it is not so important in animals. So this was the basic function of each of these kinds of sugar, but how actually is the conversion between them taking place? Now there's a special kind of reaction which is known as a condensation reaction that helps to combine them, and there is another reaction known as hydrolysis that helps to separate them. And this is going to be our next focus, the role of condensation reactions and hydrolysis in the relationship between monosaccharides, disaccharides, and polysaccharides. So condensation is also known as a dehydration reaction, and this occurs when the molecules are covalently joined together. So when molecules are covalently joined together and water is formed as a byproduct. Now in carbohydrates, the bond that is formed that is known as a glycosidic linkage. A glycosidic linkage. So that is the bond that is formed. Now the opposite of a condensation reaction is a hydrolysis reaction, which needs a water molecule to break a covalent bond between two subunits. Now monosaccharides are single monomers that will be joined to form disaccharides, but sugars that contain multiple subunits, more than 10, they are called polysaccharides. So usually they have more than 10. So let me give you an example of a condensation reaction occurring between two monosaccharides. Now this over here is example of a condensation reaction. So you can see this is the first monomer, this is the second monomer, and one OH from here and one OH from here are taken, and then the monomer becomes a disaccharide. Water is given out, so we got oxygen, hydrogen, oxygen, hydrogen. Water is given, and there's a bond using this oxygen that will be used to attach this part and this part of the two molecules, and this is the resulting product. So that is one example of how a condensation reaction can take place. The opposite of this reaction is going to be a hydrolysis reaction. And that is all the important information that you need to know right now about carbohydrates. And the next kind of organic compound that we are moving to is lipids. So let's get started with what are lipids. Now, lipids are a group of organic molecules that are insoluble in water. So let's write that down, insoluble in water, but they are soluble in non-polar organic solvents. And because water is polar, that's why it's not soluble in water, but they are soluble in non-polar organic solvents. Some of the common lipids include triglycerides, which are nothing but fats and oils, phospholipids, and steroids. In case of lipids also, there are condensation and hydrolysis reactions, and there is a relationship between glycerol, triglycerides, and fatty acids. But before that, there is an important concept that you need to know. That means the different kinds of fatty acids which are there. They're usually of two kinds. One is saturated. Saturated ones are the ones without any double bonds. And then you have unsaturated, which are the ones with a double bond. So let me give you two examples of that. So this would be example of a saturated one without any double bond. So this chain over here can continue as long as the molecule is, finally culminating in CH3. So you have hydrogen molecules on both sides and there is no double bond in this chain. So it will be known as a saturated fatty acid. The next important thing is knowing the role of condensation reaction. Now the condensation reaction, it occurs between three hydroxyl groups of glycerol and the carboxyl group of three fatty acids. So this is the condensation reaction in case of lipids. Now this reaction, it gives rise to a triglyceride and a molecule and three molecules of water. The bond between the glycerol and the fatty acids, so you have the glycerol here and the fatty acids, the bond is an ester linkage. So when one of the fatty acids is replaced by a phosphate group, a phospholipid is formed. So I'll explain that with the help of one example. So this on the left side is example of glycerol. The next one are three fatty acids. So the long chain of carbon, it's represented like this in a zigzag manner. So these are three fatty acids and let's see what the result is going to be. So this is the product, which is a triglyceride, and oxygen is used here. So what else is going to be formed? Three molecules of water. So this resultant, let me label it, this is a triglyceride. Now, why do you think lipids are so important for a human being or for any animal? That is going to be the next focus. So we are going to state three very, very important functions of lipids. First thing, it is very useful to form the structure. So they are the main components of cell membranes when they are in the form of phospholipids. They help in hormonal signaling. So steroids especially, they are involved in hormonal signaling. For example, estrogen, progesterone and testosterone. And the third important function is insulation. Fats, in case of animals, they can serve as heat insulators, while sphingolipids, so I'm going to write it down here, fats can help to serve as heat insulators, and sphingolipids are used in the myelin sheath of neurons. They act as electrical insulators. So fats are for heat and sphingolipids are for electrical insulation. Coming to the fourth important function, that is protection. Triglycerides, they form a layer of tissue around many key and important internal organs, and they provide protection against physical injuries. And the fifth important function is storage of energy. Triglycerides, they can be used as a long-term energy storage source. So what is the difference between the storage in case of carbohydrates and in case of lipids? Now there are lots of similarities, so let me draw a diagram here. Carbohydrates, lipids, the similarities and the differences. So this table is very, very important. Coming to similarities, the complex carbohydrates and lipids. Let me just call it C and L. The complex carbohydrates and lipids both contain a lot of chemical energy. And can be used for energy storage. Secondly, the complex carbohydrates and lipids are both insoluble in water. They are both insoluble in water. That means they're not easily transported. And the third thing, carbohydrates and lipids, they burn clearer and cleaner than proteins. That means they do not yield any kind of nitrogenous waste on burning. So we say it's a clean burning. Now coming to the differences between carbohydrates and proteins. Now lipid molecules contain more energy per gram as compared to carbohydrates, about twice as much. Carbohydrates on the other hand are more readily digested than lipids and they release their energy more rapidly. Another difference is monosaccharides and disaccharides, they are water soluble. And over here we were talking only about the complex ones. So monosaccharides and disaccharides, they are soluble and they are easier to transport from storage sites as compared to lipids. And animals they tend to use carbohydrates for short-term energy storage and lipids are used for long-term energy storage. Carbohydrates, they are stored as glycogen in the liver. Lipids are stored as fats. In plants, the carbohydrates are stored as cellulose and lipids are stored as oils. And one more important difference, lipids have less effect on osmotic pressure within a cell. So less effect on osmotic pressure in a cell. So that is all that you need to know about the lipids. The next category of organic compounds is proteins. Now, proteins are very large organic compounds that are made up of amino acids arranged in a linear chain. The sequence of amino acids in a protein, it is defined by a gene and it is encoded in the genetic code. So if you watch a video on transcription and translation of the DNA, and that will give you an idea of how proteins are made and how amino acids are manufactured. So let us go ahead and identify some kind of amino acids. Now, amino acids will usually have a structure like this, a carbon atom in the center. A carboxylic group will be there. So this over here is known as a carboxylic group. And this over here is known as an amino group. Over here is the side chain, which is variable. So we just name it R. So that would vary for different amino acids. The remaining structure is going to remain the same. Now, just like carbohydrates and lipids, there are condensation and hydrolysis reaction in amino acids and polypeptides. So let's do that. Now, condensation reaction, in case of these amino acids and polypeptides, it occurs between the amino group of one amino acid and the carboxyl group of the other amino acid. This reaction forms a dipeptide and a molecule of water. This dipeptide is held together with a peptide bond. And multiple amino acids can be joined to form a polypeptide chain. So here we are taking 2, it could be 3, 4, 5, so many. And in the presence of water, polypeptides can also be broken down into individual amino acids, and that will be known as a hydrolysis reaction. So let's cover one example of a condensation reaction. So this is the formation of a dipeptide. As you can notice over here, we have the amino group of one amino acid, we have this group of another. This joins to form the peptide bond and a molecule of water. So this is all that we are going to cover in this video. What we have done is information about carbohydrates, lipids and proteins. We have discussed the condensation reaction for each of them and also examples of such reactions. So I hope you were able to understand all of this. In the next video, what we are going to do is a very important topic, that is the structure of the DNA. So that is all for this video. Don't forget to visit us at perfect-scores.com. You can share and like our page at Facebook, and if you have any suggestions or feedback, you can give it at this email address. So thank you so much for watching this video.